Maya Rodriguez walked into the Advanced Tactical Studies classroom and took her usual seat in the back row. The chair was old and creaked when she sat down, but nobody turned to look. They never did. She pulled out her worn leather notebook and opened it to a fresh page, waiting for class to begin. The classroom buzzed with conversation in dozens of different languages. The Draknari students spoke in deep, rumbling voices that sounded like distant thunder. Their reptilian scales caught the light from the overhead panels as they gestured with clawed hands. The Vex collective representatives communicated through clicking sounds and rapid antenna movements. The luminari floated near the ceiling, their energy forms shifting between blue and gold as they shared thoughts. Maya understood most of what they were saying. A universal translator built into her academy uniform helped. But she had also spent the last 2 years learning the major galactic languages. It was easier to blend in when you could follow conversations without the slight delay of mechanical translation. Not that blending in was working very well. Out of 300 cadets at the Galactic Defense Academy, only 12 were human. Maya was one of the quietest among them. While her fellow humans like Jake Morrison and Alex Chun made friends with other species and joined study groups, Maya preferred to observe from the edges. Commander Thane entered the classroom, his massive Draknari frame filling the doorway. His dark green scales bore the scars of old battles, and his yellow eyes swept across the room with military precision. The conversations died down as students took their seats. "Today we will discuss the Battle of Korath Prime," Commander Thane announced. His voice carried the authority of someone who had seen real combat. This engagement took place 300 years ago and demonstrates the importance of overwhelming force in military operations. Maya had read about Korath Prime in the Academy library. The official reports described a textbook example of superior numbers defeating a smaller defensive force. The Draknari Empire had sent 10,000 ships against a rebellious colony defended by only 800 vessels. The battle lasted 6 hours and ended with complete victory for the Empire. "The key to victory," Commander Thane continued, "was the application of maximum force at the decisive point. The rebel fleet attempted to use hit-and-run tactics, but they lacked the numbers to sustain such operations." A Vex Collective student raised one of its 4 arms. "Commander, what about the civilian casualties?" The reports mentioned significant losses among the colony population. "Regrettable but necessary," Commander Thane replied. "War requires difficult choices. The rebels chose to fight from populated areas, forcing our hand." Maya wrote in her notebook, but not the standard lesson notes her classmates were taking. Instead, she sketched out the battle formation from the official reports and began noting discrepancies. The rebel fleet's movements didn't match the desperate and disorganized description in the Empire's records. Their retreat patterns showed clear signs of planning and coordination. "Miss Rodriguez," Commander Thane's voice cut through her thoughts. "Perhaps you would share your thoughts on the tactical situation?" Maya looked up to find the entire class staring at her. She could feel her cheeks warming, but kept her voice steady. "The battle seems straightforward, sir." "Superior numbers." 1. Indeed. "And what does this teach us about human military capabilities?" This was a familiar question. Maya had heard variations of it in every military history class. "That humans are still learning galactic warfare standards, sir." Commander Thane nodded approvingly. "Correct? Humanity has only possessed faster-than-light travel for 2 centuries. Your species' military experience is limited to primitive planetary conflicts. The scale and sophistication of galactic warfare requires different thinking." Several students chuckled at this. Maya had heard the jokes before. Humans and their explosive projectile weapons were considered quaint by species that had mastered energy-based combat millennia ago. Their tendency toward emotional decision-making was seen as a liability in the calculated world of space combat. After class, Maya walked through the academy corridors alongside Jake Morrison. He was talking about the upcoming simulation exercises, but Maya was only half listening. The walls displayed holographic images of famous battles and decorated officers from across the galaxy. Not a single human face appeared among them. "You know what gets me?" Jake said as they entered the cafeteria. "They act like we're children playing at war. But Earth fought more major conflicts in the last 500 years than most of these species have seen in their entire histories." Maya collected her meal and found an empty table. The cafeteria served food from dozens of worlds, but the human section was small and often ignored. She took a bite of synthesized protein that was supposed to taste like chicken and failed badly. "Maybe that's the problem," she said quietly. "What do you mean?" "We fought too many wars. To them, that makes us primitive. Violence is something civilized species grow out of." Jake frowned. "So what, we should be ashamed that our ancestors knew how to fight?" Maya watched a group of Drakneri students at a nearby table. They were discussing battle formations with the casual air of people talking about academic theory. For them, warfare was an intellectual exercise. They studied historical battles the way human students might study ancient literature. "No," Maya said finally. "But maybe we shouldn't advertise it either." The rest of the day followed the familiar pattern. In xenobiology, Professor Ken lectured about adapting equipment for different atmospheric conditions. Maya took careful notes while her classmates focused on the easier aspects of the material. In strategic planning, Colonel Vex outlined the basic principles of fleet movements. Maya filled 3 pages with diagrams while others struggled with the concepts. During the evening study period, Maya returned to the library. The massive space held information from thousands of worlds, but she always found herself in the same section, military history. Tonight she pulled up files on asymmetric warfare, focusing on conflicts where smaller forces had defeated larger ones. The examples were rare in galactic history. Most species had developed beyond internal conflict before reaching the stars. Wars between different civilizations were typically fought between roughly equal forces using agreed-upon rules of engagement. The concept of total war, where entire populations became legitimate targets, was almost unknown. Maya's tablet chimed with an incoming message. It was from Alex Chun, asking if she wanted to join a study group for tomorrow's tactical simulation. She typed back a polite decline and returned to her research. Hours later, as the library prepared to close, Maya gathered her materials. The night custodian, an elderly luminari whose energy field had faded to a dim amber, nodded at her as she left. Maya had become a familiar sight during the late hours, walking back to her dormitory through the quiet corridors. Maya passed the Hall of Honor. Display cases held medals and commendations from graduates who had gone on to distinguished military careers. Ships captains, fleet admirals, strategic planners who had shaped the course of galactic defense. She paused in front of one display case that held the medal of Commander Sarah Chun, the highest-ranking human graduate in the Academy's history. Chun had commanded a destroyer squadron and earned recognition for her steady leadership and adherence to established protocols. The description made her sound competent but unremarkable. Maya's reflection stared back at her from the display. Case glass. 20 years old, average height, brown hair pulled back in regulation style. Nothing about her appearance suggested hidden depths or exceptional abilities. She looked exactly like what her instructor saw, a quiet human student trying to keep up with her more naturally gifted classmates. She continued to her dormitory room, a small space she shared with Lisa Park, another human cadet. Lisa was already asleep, her tactical manuals stacked neatly on her desk. Maya changed into sleeping clothes and sat at her own desk, opening her leather notebook to review the day's observations. Tomorrow would bring another simulation exercise. Her team would likely follow standard galactic tactical doctrine, move in predictable formations, and achieve mediocre results. Maya would suggest minor improvements that would be politely ignored, and the instructors would rate their performance as adequate. It was a comfortable routine, safe, unremarkable. Maya closed her notebook and prepared for sleep, unaware that in just 3 weeks, everything would change. The final examination simulation was being prepared by the Academy's best strategic minds, designed to test everything the cadets had learned about proper galactic warfare. It would be the perfect opportunity for a quiet human student to show that sometimes proper warfare wasn't enough. Maya stared at the holographic display in the Academy's main briefing room. 300 cadets sat in rows of seats that curved around the central projection area. The image showed a planet called New Haven, a mining colony with 2 million inhabitants scattered across 6 major cities. "Your final examination begins now," announced Admiral Torres, the Academy's commandant. Her voice carried the weight of 40 years in galactic defense. "This simulation has been used for 50 years to test graduating cadets. The scenario is simple. New Haven is under attack by a hostile force with overwhelming numbers. Your mission is to defend the colony and save as many civilians as possible." The hologram shifted to show enemy fleet positions. Red dots surrounded the planet like angry insects. Maya counted the ships quickly and felt her stomach drop. The attacking force had nearly 10 times the firepower of the defending fleet. The highest success rate ever achieved was 43% civilian survival, Admiral Torres continued. Most teams manage to save between 20 and 30% of the population. You have been divided into mixed species teams of 8 members each. Team assignments are now being displayed. Maya checked her tablet and found her team number, Team 17. She walked to the designated meeting room and found 7 other cadets already there. Her heart sank slightly when she saw the composition. Corvin was a Drachnary with dark blue scales and the confident bearing of someone born to command. His family had produced generals for 6 generations. 7 of Minds represented the Vex Collective, its insectoid features sharp and calculating. There was also Bright Path, a luminary whose energy field pulsed with excitement, and 4 others from different species. The only other human was Alex Chun, the engineering student she knew from previous classes. He gave her a small nod of recognition, but the others barely acknowledged her presence. "We should establish leadership structure first," Corvin announced, his deep voice filling the room. "I have the most command training and tactical experience." 7 of Minds clicked its mandibles in agreement. "Logical. Drachnary military doctrine is well suited to defensive operations." Maya opened her notebook and began sketching the basic situation while the others discussed command structure. She had reviewed the New Haven simulation in the Academy database. 50 years of attempts, thousands of cadets, and nobody had ever saved more than half the civilians. "Rodriguez?" Corvan addressed her directly. "You will handle communications. Coordination. Chun, you manage technical systems. The rest of us will plan the actual strategy." Maya nodded without comment. She had expected this assignment. Humans were considered good at support roles but poor at strategic thinking. She listened. As her teammates began outlining their defense plan, it was textbook galactic military doctrine. Establish defensive positions around the major population centers. Create overlapping fields of fire. Use the planet's orbital defenses to channel enemy ships into killing zones. Fight a controlled retreat when positions became untenable, evacuating civilians during the withdrawal. For 3 days, Maya watched her teammates refine their strategy. They ran computer models, calculated optimal ship positions, and planned evacuation routes. Everything followed established principles taught in their tactical classes. On the morning of the 4th day, Maya finally spoke up. "What if we try a different approach?" she asked quietly. Corvin looked up from the tactical display. "What do you mean?" Maya moved to the hologram controls and adjusted the view to show the entire star system. The enemy fleet is large and well coordinated. They expect us to fight defensively because that's what everyone always does. "Because it's the logical strategy," 7 of Minds interjected. "We cannot match their firepower in direct combat." "Right, so what if we don't fight them directly?" Maya highlighted several points on the display. "What if instead of trying to stop them, we make them stop themselves?" Brightpath's energy field shifted to a confused orange color. "Explain this concept." Maya felt all eyes on her as she continued. "Large fleets move slowly. They need coordination, supply lines, communication, networks. What if we attack those things instead of their ships? Hit-and-run tactics have limited effectiveness, Corvan said dismissively. The simulation parameters show that previous teams tried similar approaches. Not hit and run, Maya said, calling up historical data on her tablet. Psychological warfare. Make them think we're stronger than we are. Make them make mistakes, Alex leaned forward with interest. What kind of mistakes? Maya began outlining her ideas. Instead of meeting the enemy fleet in organized battle lines, scatter the defending ships and attack in seemingly random patterns. Target communication arrays and supply vessels rather than warships. Use false retreat signals to lure enemy squadrons into traps. Most importantly, never let the enemy predict what the defenders would do next. This is madness, 7 of minds clicked. Military operations require order and predictability. For us, yes, Maya agreed. But also for them. If we act unpredictably, their command structure breaks down trying to respond to threats they can't understand. Kovan studied the tactical display with new interest. You want to turn their size advantage into a weakness. Exactly. Big fleets are hard to change direction quickly. If we can confuse their command decisions, they'll start getting in there. Own way, the debate continued for hours. Most of the team remained skeptical of Maya's suggestions, calling them too risky and unproven. But Alex supported her ideas. And gradually others began to see possibilities in the unconventional approach. Finally, Corvan made the decision. We'll incorporate some of Rodriguez's suggestions into our primary plan. If the situation becomes desperate, we can fall back on standard defensive doctrine. Maya felt a mix of excitement and nervousness as the team finalized their strategy. They would begin with conventional defenses but quickly shift to her chaotic approach if the enemy gained the upper hand. It was a compromise, but it gave her ideas a chance to work. The simulation began 3 days later in the Academy's main combat center. Each team occupied a separate command bridge with full holographic displays and communication systems, designed to replicate real combat conditions. Maya took her position at the communications console while Corvan assumed overall command. The enemy fleet appeared on their screens, massive and intimidating. 200 ships moving in perfect formation toward New Haven. Initial defensive positions, Corvan ordered. All ships prepare for standard engagement protocols. The first phase went exactly as their textbook training predicted. The defending fleet took positions around the planet's major cities and began exchanging fire with the advancing enemy. For 30 minutes, it looked like every other simulation attempt in the past 50 years. Then the enemy began to overwhelm their positions, just as Meha had expected. We're losing the orbital platforms, Alex reported from his engineering station. Estimated 20 minutes before they're all destroyed. Time to try something different, Maya said quietly. Corvan looked at the tactical display showing their deteriorating position. Red warning lights flashed across multiple systems. Do it. Implement Rodriguez's plan. Maya activated her communication systems and began broadcasting new orders to the defending fleet. All ships break formation. Attack pattern Chaos 7. I repeat, Chaos 7. The bridge fell silent as their carefully organized fleet scattered across the system. Ships that had been fighting in coordinated squadrons suddenly began acting like individual units pursuing their own agendas. What are they doing? 7 of minds asked, watching friendly ships move in seemingly random directions. Making the enemy think we've lost our minds, Maya replied. Monitoring the enemy fleet's response. At first, the enemy commanders tried to respond with standard tactical doctrines. They sent pursuit squadrons after retreating ships and attempted to consolidate their attack on the remaining defensive positions. But Maya's forces refused to behave predictably. A squadron of human fighters led by cadets from another team suddenly appeared behind the enemy formation, attacking supply ships before vanishing into an asteroid field. 3 destroyers made what looked like a suicidal attack on the enemy flagship, only to retreat at the last moment after damaging crucial communication arrays. Enemy fleet is slowing advance, Brightpath reported. Their formation is becoming loose. Maya smiled as she watched the enemy commanders struggle to understand what they were facing. Large military operations depend on predictable responses. When the defenders stopped following standard tactical doctrine, the enemy's decision-making process began to break down. They're sending scouts in multiple directions, Alex observed. They don't know where our main force is. Because we don't have a main force anymore, Maya explained. Every ship is acting independently, but following the same basic objective. Attack when they can, retreat when they must, never do what the enemy expects. Hours passed as the chaotic battle continued. The enemy fleet, designed to crush organized resistance, found itself fighting dozens of separate engagements simultaneously. Their commanders issued conflicting orders trying to respond to threats that disappeared as soon as they moved to counter them. Meanwhile, Maya coordinated the evacuation of civilians using the same unpredictable methods. Transport ships followed random routes that made no tactical sense but were impossible for the enemy to intercept effectively. When the simulation finally ended, the command center fell completely silent. The final statistics appeared on the main display, and Maya heard someone gasp in disbelief. Civilian survival rate, 91%. Enemy fleet status, completely destroyed. Maya stared at the numbers, hardly believing them herself. In 50 years of attempts, no team had ever saved more than half the civilians. Most attempts ended with the defending fleet destroyed and the planet captured. Admiral Torres entered their command bridge, her face showing complete bewilderment. "Cadet Rodriguez," she said slowly, "please explain what just happened here." Maya looked around at her teammates, all staring at her with new expressions. Even Corvin seemed stunned by the results. "We stopped fighting the way they expected us to fight," she said simply. "So they forgot how to fight us." The silence stretched on as the implications sank in. Maya had just accomplished something that galactic military strategists had considered impossible. She had proven that sometimes the best way to win was to break all the rules everyone else followed. She closed her notebook and prepared to face whatever came next, knowing that her quiet days at the academy had just come to an end. Maya walked through the academy corridors the next morning and noticed something had changed. Conversations stopped when she passed. Cadets turned to stare at her with expressions she had never seen before. Some looked curious, others seemed wary, and a few appeared almost afraid. Word of the simulation results had spread through the academy overnight. 91% civilian survival, complete enemy fleet destruction. Numbers that rewrote 50 years of tactical assumptions. In the cafeteria, Maya found herself facing a new problem. The usual empty seats around the human section were now occupied by cadets from other species wanting to sit near her. A Drachnary cadet named Kess approached her table carrying his breakfast tray. "May I join you?" he asked politely. Maya nodded, unsure how to respond to this sudden attention. Kess had never spoken to her before today. "I reviewed the simulation recordings," Kess said as he sat down. "Your tactical approach was unlike anything we studied in class. Where did you learn such methods?" "I read a lot," Maya replied simply. "What kind of reading produces strategies that defeat impossible odds?" Maya took a bite of her synthetic eggs and considered how to answer. "Human military history, mostly. Earth had many wars before we reached space." Kess leaned forward with interest. "But the Academy teaches that human conflicts were primitive affairs, small-scale planetary disputes." "They were, but we fought them for thousands of years. We got good at finding ways to win when winning seemed impossible." More cadets gathered around their table as Maya spoke. 7 of minds from her simulation team clicked its way over, followed by several others she recognized from advanced classes. "Explain this concept of psychological warfare," 7 of minds requested. "Vex collective doctrine emphasizes logical, tactical decisions. How does psychology influence military outcomes?" Maya found herself in the strange position of teaching fellow cadets concepts that seemed obvious to her. She explained how fear and uncertainty could paralyze decision-making, how unpredictable actions could force enemies to waste resources, responding to false threats. How breaking expected patterns could turn an enemy's own size and organization against them. The conversation continued until Maya realized she was late for her first class. She gathered her things and hurried to strategic planning. Expecting to face the usual routine of lectures and note-taking. Instead, Colonel Vex asked her to remain after class. The other students filed out slowly, many glancing back at Maya with new expressions of respect or curiosity. "Cadet Rodriguez," Colonel Vex began when they were alone, "I have reviewed your simulation performance extensively. Your results challenge fundamental assumptions about proper military doctrine." Maya shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "I just, tried something different, sir." "Different is an understatement. You achieved results that our best strategic minds considered impossible. The simulation was designed by experts with centuries of combined experience." Colonel Vex activated a holographic display showing the battle data from Maya's simulation. "Your forces moved in patterns that appeared random, yet achieved perfect coordination. Enemy response times increased by 300% as their commanders struggled to counter threats they could not predict." Maya watched the replay of her chaotic battle plan. Seeing it from the outside, she could understand why it looked impossible. Ships moved in seemingly independent directions while somehow supporting each other perfectly. How did you coordinate such complex operations without standard command structures? Colonel Vex asked. "I gave them simple rules instead of complex orders," Maya explained. "Attack targets of opportunity, retreat when outnumbered. Never do the same thing twice in a row. Each ship captain could make their own decisions based on local conditions. But that should have resulted in chaos and confusion among your own forces." Maya shook her head. "Only if they were trying to follow traditional tactics. Once they accepted that unpredictability was the goal, the coordination became natural." Colonel Vex studied the data for several more minutes. "I want you to present your methods to the advanced faculty next week. Prepare a detailed explanation of your tactical philosophy." Maya felt her stomach tighten. Speaking to fellow cadets was one thing, but addressing the academy's senior instructors was terrifying. "Sir, I'm not sure I can explain it well enough for a formal presentation. You will learn. This knowledge is too valuable to remain limited to one cadet's intuition." That afternoon, Maya found herself called to Commander Thane's office. The massive Draknari instructor sat behind a desk that seemed too small for his frame. Battle scars covered his dark green scales, and his yellow eyes held the weight of real combat experience. "Sit down, Rodriguez," he said without preamble. "We need to discuss your simulation performance." Maya took the chair across from his desk and waited. "I have been teaching military tactics for 20 years, Commander Thane continued. "I have seen thousands of cadets attempt that simulation. Most follow predictable patterns. Some show genuine strategic insight. None have ever achieved what you accomplished yesterday." He activated a wall display showing statistical analysis of simulation attempts over the past 5 decades. Maya's results appeared as a single point far beyond all previous attempts. "Tell me about human warfare," Commander Thane said. "Not the sanitized version we teach in galactic history." "The real version," Maya hesitated. Human military history was often considered embarrassing by galactic standards. The constant conflicts, the massive casualties, the willingness to destroy entire cities to achieve victory. "Earth was never unified until we developed space travel," she began slowly. "Different nations, different peoples, always fighting for resources or territory or ideas. The wars never really stopped. How many major conflicts? Hundreds. Maybe thousands, depending on how you count them. Some lasted for decades. Others ended quickly but killed millions of people." Commander Thane's expression grew more serious. "And humans participated in all of these conflicts?" "Every human nation had military forces. Every generation grew up knowing that war was always possible. Children studied battles the way other species study art or literature." "Show me." Maya used the wall display to call up information about Earth's military history. She showed Commander Thane battles where outnumbered forces had defeated larger armies through superior tactics. Conflicts where entire populations had resisted occupation for years using guerrilla warfare. Wars where the side with worse technology had won through better strategy. This battle, Commander Thane pointed to one example, 300 soldiers held off 30,000 for 3 days. How? They chose the battlefield? Forced the enemy to attack uphill through narrow passages. Made their numbers irrelevant. And this one, a naval force of 12 ships defeated a fleet of 60. Night attack? Bad weather. They used conditions that neutralized the enemy's advantages. Commander Thane studied dozens of examples, his expression growing more thoughtful with each one. Your species has been at war continuously for its entire recorded history, until about 200 years ago, yes, sir. What changed? Maya considered how to explain humanity's transition to peace. We got too good at killing each other. The weapons became so powerful that actually using them would have destroyed everything we were fighting for. So you achieved peace through superior warfare capability. Eventually. But it took thousands of years of practice. Commander Thane leaned back in his chair, processing this information. Most galactic species achieved peace through cultural evolution. They developed beyond the need for large-scale conflict before reaching the stars. Yes, sir. From what I've studied, most civilizations had maybe a dozen major wars in their entire history, usually fought with strict rules about civilian casualties and acceptable targets, while humans had dozens of major wars every century. Maya nodded uncomfortably. She had always been somewhat ashamed of humanity's violent past, especially when surrounded by species that had evolved beyond such conflicts. Do not apologize for your species' history, Commander Thane said, apparently reading her expression. What I initially saw as primitive barbarism, I now recognize as the most comprehensive military education any species has ever received. He stood and walked to his window overlooking the Academy's training grounds. Every human grows up knowing. Warfare at a level most galactic officers never achieve. You learn strategy not as academic theory, but as survival necessity. I suppose that's one way to look at it, sir. It is the only way to look at it. Your simulation results prove that human tactical thinking operates on fundamentally different principles than standard galactic doctrine. Commander Thane turned back to face her. I am recommending you for advanced strategic studies. Your methods need to be analyzed, documented, and potentially integrated into our curriculum. Maya felt overwhelmed by the sudden attention and expectations. Sir, I'm just one cadet. I got lucky with one simulation. Luck does not produce 91% survival rates against impossible odds. That result came from a depth of strategic understanding that our current education system does not provide. He returned to his desk and pulled up Maya's academic records. I have reviewed your previous assignments with new perspective. What I previously graded as adequate performance, I now recognize as highly efficient solutions that accomplished objectives with minimal resource expenditure. Maya looked at her grades displayed on the screen. Average marks in every subject, exactly what she had expected. You have been hiding your capabilities, Commander Thane observed. Why? I wasn't hiding anything. I just tried to fit in and not cause problems. By deliberately performing below your potential, Maya realized he was right. She had been unconsciously holding back, giving answers that met requirements without showcasing her deeper understanding of military principles. Yes, sir, I suppose I was. That ends now. The galaxy faces threats that conventional tactics cannot handle. Your simulation proved that human strategic thinking might provide solutions we desperately need. As Maya left Commander Thane's office, she felt the weight of expectation settling on her shoulders. The quiet anonymity she had enjoyed was gone forever. Now, everyone would be watching to see if the human cadet could live up to her unexpected reputation. Walking back to her dormitory, she passed groups of cadets engaged in animated discussions. She caught fragments of conversations about human tactics and asymmetric warfare, and psychological operations, terms that had never been part of Academy discussions before yesterday. Maya realized that her simulation victory had done more than just earn her recognition. It had opened questions about fundamental assumptions that had guided galactic military thinking for centuries. She was no longer just a quiet human cadet trying to blend in. Whether she liked it or not, she had become the symbol of humanity's potential contribution to galactic defense. The challenge now would be proving that her success was not just a lucky accident, but the beginning of a new understanding of what warfare could be. Maya stood in the Academy's main briefing hall alongside 300 other senior cadets. The emergency assembly had been called at dawn, interrupting their normal class schedules. Admiral Torres paced in front of the massive holographic display, her expression grim. "Long-range sensors have detected a Devourer incursion in the Outer Rim," she announced. "The colony world Haven's Rest has gone silent. All communications ceased 48 hours ago." Maya felt a chill run down her spine. She had studied the Devourers in her xenobiology classes. Ancient mechanical beings that consumed entire worlds to fuel their expansion. They had been quiet for over a century, leading many to hope they had finally moved beyond galactic borders. The hologram shifted to show Haven's Rest, a green world with sprawling cities and industrial complexes. Population: 2 million colonists from a dozen different species. Reconnaissance drones confirm our worst fears, Admiral Torres continued. The Devourers have established multiple harvesting stations on the planet's surface. They are systematically stripping all organic and mineral resources. Images appeared showing massive mechanical structures rising from what had once been fertile farmland. Dark smoke poured from processing facilities while swarms of smaller machines carved through the landscape like hungry insects. "The rescue fleet departed this morning under the command of Admiral Harrison Wells," Admiral Torres said. "Due to the severity of this situation, the entire senior class will accompany the fleet as combat observers. This will be your introduction to real warfare." Maya exchanged glances with Jake Morrison, who sat 2 rows ahead of her. Real combat. Everything they had studied and simulated was about to become deadly reality. "Departure is in 6 hours, Admiral Torres concluded. Prepare your gear and report to Transport Bay 7. Remember, you are observers only. Do not interfere with fleet operations unless specifically ordered to do so." The next few hours passed in a blur of preparation. Maya packed her personal belongings and reviewed everything she knew about Devourer tactics. The mechanical beings fought with cold efficiency, using overwhelming numbers and superior technology to crush resistance quickly. The transport ship Endeavour carried all 300 cadets toward the battle zone. Maya found herself assigned to quarters with Lisa Park and 2 other human cadets. The cramped space buzzed with nervous conversation as they tried to process the reality of their situation. "I heard the Devourers haven't been seen in our sector for over 100 years, Lisa said, staring out the small porthole at the stars streaking past. "Why are they back now?" "Maybe they ran out of easier targets," replied Tom Mitchell, another human cadet. "The Outer Rim colonies are isolated and lightly defended." Maya listened to their speculation while reviewing tactical data on her tablet. The Devourers operated according to strict logical patterns. They identified the most efficient methods for resource extraction and followed those methods precisely. Their mechanical nature made them predictable in some ways, but their technological superiority made conventional resistance nearly impossible. The journey to Haven's Rest took 3 days. During that time, Maya found herself approached by cadets from other species who wanted to discuss her simulation methods. Word of her unconventional tactics had spread throughout the transport, and many were curious about human warfare techniques. "The Devourers use logical decision-making processes," observed Kess, the Draknari cadet who had started sitting with Maya at meals. "Your chaotic approach might confuse their tactical systems." "Maybe," Maya replied carefully. "But this isn't a simulation. Real people are dying down there." When they finally arrived at Haven's Rest, the sight that greeted them was worse than Maya had imagined. The rescue fleet hung in orbit around a world that looked like it was being eaten alive. Massive scars covered the planet's surface where devourer harvesting machines had stripped away everything organic. Maya and her fellow cadets were assigned to observation posts aboard various ships in the fleet. She found herself on the bridge of the dreadnought Stellar Pride, Admiral Wells' flagship. The bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency, but Maya could see the tension in their movements. Admiral Wells was a tall man with graying hair and tired eyes. Maya had studied his service record during the journey. He was the highest-ranking human in the Galactic Defense Force, known for his steady leadership and careful adherence to military protocol. "First attack wave launches in 30 minutes, he announced to the bridge crew. "Standard assault formation Alpha 7. Target the primary harvesting stations." Maya watched from her assigned corner as the fleet prepared for battle. Everything followed established galactic military doctrine. Coordinated formations, overwhelming firepower directed at obvious targets, careful preservation of friendly forces. The attack began with a massive bombardment of the Devourer installations. Energy weapons lit up the planet's surface as the rescue fleet concentrated its fire on the largest harvesting stations. For a few minutes it looked like the assault might succeed, then the Devourers responded. Swarms of mechanical fighters rose from the planet's surface, moving in perfect coordination. Their weapons were more advanced than anything in the galactic fleet, cutting through ship defenses like they were made of paper. Within minutes, the rescue fleet had lost a dozen ships, with minimal damage to the enemy. "All ships withdraw to safe distance," Admiral Wells ordered. "Regroup for second assault attempt." Maya watched the tactical display as the fleet pulled back to lick its wounds. The Devourers had responded exactly as their programming dictated. Identify threat, calculate optimal response. Execute with mechanical precision. The second assault attempt followed a different approach. This time, the fleet tried to overwhelm specific targets with concentrated fire while avoiding the main Devourer response. The results were the same, massive losses for minimal gain. After the third failed assault in 2 days, Admiral Wells called a meeting of his senior staff. Maya was surprised to find herself included, along with several other cadets who had shown tactical aptitude. "We're not making progress," Admiral Wells admitted. "Standard assault doctrines aren't working against Devourer defenses. They adapt too quickly to conventional tactics." Commander Voss, the fleet's tactical officer, pulled up damage reports. "We've lost 30% of our combat strength. At this rate, we'll be forced to withdraw within 48 hours. And abandon 2 million colonists to be processed into raw materials," Admiral Wells said grimly. The room fell silent as everyone contemplated that reality. Maya found herself thinking about the simulation that had changed her life. The impossible scenario where conventional tactics failed completely. "Admiral," she said quietly, surprised by her own boldness. Every head in the room turned toward her. Admiral Wells raised an eyebrow. "Yes, Cadet Rodriguez? What if we stop trying to fight them the way they expect to be fought?" Commander Voss frowned. "Explain." Maya moved to the tactical display, her heart pounding. "The Devourers are machines. They calculate optimal responses to threats and execute those responses perfectly. But what if we give them problems they can't calculate optimal responses to?" "You're suggesting psychological warfare against mechanical beings?" Commander Voss asked skeptically. "Not psychology exactly. More like logical warfare. Make them waste processing power trying to understand threats that don't make sense." Admiral Wells studied the tactical situation with new interest. "Go on," Maya began outlining her ideas. "Instead of attacking in organized formations, scatter the fleet into seemingly independent units. Target systems that seemed unimportant but were actually crucial to Devourer coordination. Use false retreats and feints to force the enemy to redirect resources away from harvesting operations. The goal isn't to destroy their forces," Maya explained. "It's to disrupt their efficiency. Make them spend more time and energy defending than harvesting." The senior officers looked skeptical. but Admiral Wells was listening intently. "This is similar to your simulation approach at the Academy." "Yes, sir. The principle is the same. Turn the enemy's advantages into disadvantages." Commander Voss shook his head. "This is madness. You're asking us to abandon proven tactical doctrines in favor of untested theories." "The proven doctrines aren't working," Admiral Wells pointed out. "We're facing the complete loss of Haven's Rest and its 2 million inhabitants." The debate continued for hours. Some officers supported giving Maya's approach a chance, while others insisted on following established military protocols. Finally, Admiral Wells made his decision. "We'll try Rodriguez's plan," he announced. "If conventional tactics can't save Haven's Rest, then we need unconventional solutions." Maya felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders as the meeting broke up. In a few hours, she would find out if her theories could work in real combat against an enemy that had successfully resisted galactic military forces for centuries. As she prepared for what might be the most important battle of her life, Maya thought about all the quiet years she had spent observing and learning. Tomorrow, the galaxy would discover whether a human cadet's unconventional thinking could succeed, where traditional warfare had failed. As she prepared for what might be the most important battle of her life, Maya thought about all the quiet years she had spent observing and learning. Tomorrow, the galaxy would discover whether a human cadet's unconventional thinking could succeed. Where traditional warfare had failed, the stakes could not be higher. 2 million lives hung in the balance, and the future of human military doctrine would be decided by the outcome of the next few hours. Maya stood on the bridge of the Stellar Pride as Admiral Wells gave the final orders. The rescue fleet had scattered across the Haven's Rest system according to her plan. Ships that had fought in coordinated formations for centuries now moved as independent units with seemingly random objectives. "All vessels, begin Operation Chaos Storm," Admiral Wells announced into his communications array. "Remember, your goal is confusion, not destruction. Make them think, not react." Maya watched the tactical display as friendly ships began their attacks. Instead of the usual organized assault on primary targets, each vessel pursued different objectives. Some attacked supply lines between harvesting stations. Others targeted communication arrays. A few made seemingly suicidal runs at major installations before retreating at the last moment. The Devourer's initial response followed their programming perfectly. Mechanical defense systems activated, fighter swarms launched from the planets. Surface and heavy weapons began tracking the scattered fleet. Everything proceeded according to their logical calculations. Then the chaos began to take effect. "Enemy response time is increasing," reported Commander Voss, studying the sensor data. "They're taking longer to coordinate defensive actions." Maya nodded, watching patterns in the Devourer movements. "They're trying to calculate optimal responses to multiple simultaneous threats. But our attacks don't follow any logical pattern they can predict." On the main screen, Jake Morrison led a squadron of fighters in what appeared to be a desperate attack on a major harvesting station. Just as the Devourers moved heavy defenses to counter this threat, Jake's fighters broke off and attacked a completely different target on the far side of the planet. "Brilliant," Admiral Wells murmured. The enemy repositioned significant resources to counter a threat that immediately disappeared. Alex Chiang coordinated similar operations from the engineering vessel Aurora. His teams would begin repairs on seemingly damaged ships, then suddenly reveal that the damaged vessels were actually perfectly functional, and launching surprise attacks. The battle continued for 6 hours, with Maya orchestrating the chaos. From the Stellar Pride's command center, she found herself making dozens of rapid decisions based on instinct rather than careful calculation. When enemy forces moved to counter one threat, she immediately created 3 different threats in unexpected locations. "The Devourers are starting to make mistakes," Commander Voss reported with amazement. "They just sent fighters to attack empty space where they predicted our ships would be." Maya studied the tactical display and saw what he meant. The mechanical being's logical systems were being overwhelmed by the constant need to recalculate responses to unpredictable threats. They were beginning to make decisions based on incomplete information, something their programming was not designed to handle. Time for Phase 2, Maya announced. All ships begin evacuation protocol random 7. This was the most dangerous part of her plan. While maintaining the chaotic attacks that kept Devour forces confused, the rescue fleet also had to extract civilians from the planet's surface. Traditional evacuation procedures would have been impossible under heavy enemy fire. Maya's approach was different. Instead of organized evacuation routes, rescue ships made seemingly random landings at unexpected locations. They would extract small groups of civilians, then immediately move to completely different areas. The Devourers couldn't predict where the next rescue would occur, making it impossible to position defenses effectively. "We're getting reports from the surface," came a communication from Captain Torres aboard the rescue ship Mercy. "Civilian casualties are minimal. The enemy can't coordinate attacks on evacuation sites because they don't know where we'll land next." Hour by hour, the rescue operation continued. Maya coordinated hundreds of seemingly independent actions that somehow worked together perfectly. Ships attacked, retreated, regrouped, and attacked again in patterns that appeared random but followed her overall strategic vision. The turning point came during the 14th hour of operations. The Devourers, frustrated by their inability to counter the chaotic attacks, began making increasingly desperate decisions. They recalled harvesting equipment to defend against threats that might never materialize. They repositioned forces constantly, trying to anticipate attacks that came from unexpected directions. "Enemy harvesting operations have stopped completely," reported the sensor operator. "All their resources are committed to defense." Maya felt a surge of satisfaction. This was exactly what she had hoped to achieve. By forcing the Devourers to focus entirely on defense, she had eliminated their ability to continue processing the planet's resources, but the battle was far from over. The mechanical beings still possessed superior firepower and technology. Maya's tactics had confused them, but confusion alone wouldn't be enough to achieve victory. "Admiral," she said to Wells, "I think they're about to make a major mistake." "What kind of mistake?" Maya pointed to the tactical display where Devour forces were massing near their primary command station. "They're trying to consolidate their defenses, pulling everything back to protect their most important assets." That sounds like a logical response. It would be if they were fighting a conventional enemy, but we're not going to attack their consolidated defenses. Maya activated the fleet-wide communication system. "All vessels begin final phase, Operation Ghost Dance." What happened next would be talked about in military academies for generations. Instead of attacking the consolidated Devour defenses, Maya's fleet completely ignored them. Ships spread across the system, attacking every minor installation, supply depot, and communication relay the enemy had left. UNDEFENDED. The Devourers found themselves in an impossible position. Their main forces were concentrated to defend against an attack that never came, while their entire support infrastructure was being systematically destroyed by enemies they couldn't catch. "They're trying to redeploy," Commander Voss observed. "But they can't move fast enough to counter attacks in a dozen different locations." Maya watched the enemy forces struggling to respond to her strategy. Every time they moved to defend one threatened position, she would attack 3 others. The mechanical precision that had made them so formidable was now working against them. The battle reached its climax during the 18th hour. The Devourers, having lost most of their support systems and unable to maintain their harvesting operations, began a general retreat from Haven's Rest. Their logical programming had concluded that continued operations were no longer efficient, but Maya wasn't finished yet. "All vessels, pursuit formation Chaos 9, she ordered. "Don't let them regroup." The final phase of the battle saw the scattered rescue fleet pursuing the retreating Devourers like a pack of hunters. Ships attacked from multiple directions, preventing the enemy from forming defensive formations. When Devourer forces tried to stand and fight, Maya's vessels would scatter, only to reappear attacking from completely different angles. By the 20th hour, the impossible had been achieved. The Devourer force, which had successfully resisted conventional galactic military tactics for centuries, was completely destroyed. Not a single enemy vessel escaped the system. "Final casualty reports coming in," announced the communications. "Officer, fleet losses, 8%. Civilian casualties, less than 3%. Enemy losses, 100%. The bridge of the Stellar Pride fell silent as everyone processed these numbers. Maya had not only saved Haven's Rest and its 2 million inhabitants, but had achieved the complete destruction of a Devourer harvesting fleet. It was the first time in recorded galactic history that such a victory had been accomplished. Admiral Wells turned to Maya with an expression of amazement. "Cadet Rodriguez, what you've accomplished here will change everything we thought we knew about warfare." Maya looked at the tactical display showing the liberated planet below. Smoke still rose from the damaged areas, but the harvesting operations had stopped. The world would recover. "I just did what humans have always done," she sighed quietly. "We found a way to win when winning seemed impossible." The bridge crew began the process of coordinating relief efforts for Haven's Rest, but Maya knew that the real impact of this battle would be felt far beyond this single system. The footage of human tactical doctrine defeating an enemy that conventional galactic forces couldn't touch would spread throughout known space. Everything was about to change, and Maya Rodriguez, the quiet cadet who had once sat unnoticed in the back of classrooms, was now at the center of a military revolution that would reshape how the galaxy approached warfare forever. The battle was over, but the transformation of galactic military thinking had only just begun. Maya walked through the academy corridors 6 weeks after the Battle of Haven's Rest, and the changes were impossible to ignore. Where once she had been the quiet human cadet sitting unnoticed in back rows, now conversations stopped when she approached. Faculty members nodded respectfully as she passed. Her fellow cadets looked at her with expressions ranging from admiration to something approaching awe. The battle footage had spread throughout galactic civilization faster than anyone had expected. Military academies on dozens of worlds were studying the recordings, trying to understand how human tactical doctrine had achieved what conventional warfare could not. The complete destruction of a Devourer harvesting fleet was being called the most significant military victory in over 3 centuries. Maya entered the Advanced Strategic Studies classroom to find it completely transformed. The room that had once held 30 students now accommodated over 200 cadets from across the galaxy. They had come specifically to study what was already being called human warfare theory. Professor Ken, the elderly luminary who had taught conventional tactics for 40 years, stood at the front of the classroom with an expression of bemused confusion. "As you know," he began, "Cadet Rodriguez has been assigned to assist with today's lecture on asymmetric tactical applications." Maya made her way to the front of the room, still uncomfortable with the attention but growing more accustomed to it. She activated the holographic display and called up the Haven's Rest battle footage. "The key to understanding human tactical doctrine," she began, "is recognizing that we approach warfare as a problem to be solved rather than a contest to be won through superior force." A Draknari cadet raised his clawed hand. "But how do you maintain unit coordination when every ship acts independently?" "You don't maintain coordination in the traditional sense," Maya replied. "Instead, you give every unit commander the same basic objective and let them find their own way to achieve it. The chaos is intentional." She advanced the footage to show the moment when Devourer response times began increasing dramatically. "Watch how the enemy forces start making inefficient decisions. They're designed to counter organized threats, not chaotic ones." 7 of Minds, the Vex Collective representative from her original simulation team, clicked its mandibles thoughtfully. "This approach requires commanders who can think independently while working toward shared goals. Most military training emphasizes following orders precisely." "That's the difference," Maya agreed. "Human military history forced us to develop leaders who could adapt quickly to changing situations. We had so many wars that rigid command structures got people killed." The discussion continued for 2 hours, with Maya fielding questions about tactical philosophy, command structures, and the psychological aspects of warfare that most galactic species had never considered. When class ended, she was approached by a group of senior faculty members. Commander Thane led the group, his scarred Draknari features showing deep respect. "Rodriguez, we need to discuss your future at the Academy." They escorted her to Admiral Torres' office, where she found several high-ranking military officers waiting. Admiral Wells was there, recently promoted to Supreme Strategic Command following his role in the Haven's Rest victory. Admiral Torres gestured for Maya to sit at the conference table. "Cadet Rodriguez," Admiral Torres began, "your tactical innovations have created unprecedented interest throughout the Galactic Defense Force. We're receiving requests from military commands across known space asking for instruction in human warfare techniques." Admiral Wells leaned forward. "More importantly, we're facing new threats that conventional tactics cannot handle. The Devourers were just the beginning. Long-range scouts report movement in sectors that have been quiet for millennia." Maya felt the weight of expectations settling on her shoulders once again. "What are you asking me to do?" "We're fast-tracking you through the remaining Academy requirements," Admiral Torres replied. "Upon graduation, you'll be commissioned as a strategic operations officer and assigned to develop new tactical doctrines for the entire Defense Force." "But I'm just one person," Maya protested, "and I'm still learning myself." Commander Thane spoke up. "Which is why we're also accelerating recruitment of human officers throughout all branches of service. Your species' approach to warfare represents capabilities we desperately need." Admiral Wells activated a holographic display showing fleet deployments across the galaxy. "Every major command is requesting human tactical advisors. Your simulation results and the Haven's Rest victory have convinced everyone that human strategic thinking provides solutions to problems we didn't even know we had." Maya studied the display, feeling overwhelmed by the scope of what they were proposing. "This isn't just about military tactics, is it? You're talking about changing how the entire galaxy approaches conflict." "Exactly," Admiral Torres confirmed. "For millennia, galactic civilization has maintained peace through strength and predictable diplomatic protocols. But we're discovering that some threats can't be deterred by conventional methods." Over the following weeks, Maya found herself at the center of a military revolution. The Academy's curriculum was rapidly revised to include courses on asymmetric warfare, psychological operations, and adaptive command structures. Maya was assigned to teach these new courses while completing her own accelerated graduation requirements. Her former classmates competed for positions in her tactical study groups. Corvin, the Draknari who had once dismissed her suggestions, now sought her advice on every strategic problem. The Vex Collective had sent additional representatives, specifically to study human tactical methods, but the changes extended far beyond the Academy. Reports came in from across the galaxy of human officers being assigned to previously impossible positions. Jake Morrison found himself commanding a mixed-species squadron despite being just 22 years old. Alex Chin was promoted to chief engineering officer on a dreadnought, tasked with developing new approaches to ship-to-ship combat. Maya's parents sent her a message from Earth expressing pride in her achievements, but also concern about the attention she was receiving. Her quiet daughter had become the most famous cadet in the galaxy, and they weren't sure how to process the transformation. The final test of Maya's new doctrine came 3 months after Haven's Rest. Long-range sensors detected another Devourer incursion, this time in the heavily populated core worlds. Admiral Wells personally requested Maya's assignment to the response fleet as a strategic advisor, standing on the bridge of the new flagship Defiant. Maya watched as the largest fleet in galactic history prepared to implement tactics that had never been tested on such a scale. Over 1,000 ships from dozens of species, all following human tactical doctrine. "Are you ready for this?" Admiral Wells asked quietly. Maya looked at the tactical display showing enemy positions around the threatened world. The Devourers had learned from their previous defeat and adapted their strategies accordingly. This would be the ultimate test of whether human warfare techniques could scale up to galactic-level conflicts. As ready as anyone can be, she replied. The battle that followed would be studied for generations as the moment when human strategic thinking became fully integrated into galactic military doctrine. Maya's chaotic tactics, now refined and perfected, achieved another impossible victory. The Devourer force was not just defeated but completely eliminated. With minimal casualties among the defending fleet, 6 months later, Maya stood before the Galactic Defense Council to receive her commission as the youngest strategic operations officer in recorded history. The ceremony was broadcast across known space, watched by billions of beings who had come to understand that humanity's contribution to galactic civilization extended far beyond their initial expectations. In her acceptance speech, Maya reflected on the journey that had brought her from a quiet cadet to the architect of a new military paradigm. Human warfare doctrine isn't about being more violent or aggressive than other species, she explained to the assembled dignitaries. It's about being willing to think differently when conventional approaches fail. She paused, looking out at the audience of representatives from 47 different species. We didn't evolve past war because we found better solutions. We evolved past war because we became so good at it that continued conflict became pointless. The applause that followed was respectful but thoughtful. Everyone understood that they were witnessing the emergence of a new era in galactic defense, one where humanity's unique perspective on conflict would play a crucial role in protecting civilization itself. As Maya prepared for her first assignment as a strategic operations officer, leading a joint species task force against new threats emerging from unexplored regions of space, she carried with her the quiet confidence that had always defined her character. The galaxy had learned that sometimes the most powerful weapons weren't advanced technology or overwhelming numbers, but simply the ability to approach problems from directions that enemies would never expect. And in Maya Rodriguez, they had found someone who could teach them to think like humans, creatively, adaptively, and with the hard-won wisdom that came from millennia of learning how to win wars by changing the rules of warfare itself. The quiet cadet who had once sat unnoticed in academy classrooms had become the symbol of humanity's greatest gift to galactic civilization. The knowledge that there was always another way to fight, if you were willing to think beyond the boundaries of conventional wisdom. Maya's story was just beginning, but already she had proven that in a universe full of ancient civilizations and advanced technologies, sometimes the most revolutionary force was a single human who refused to accept that anything was truly impossible.